Hello, Psych 101 students. Welcome to Module 6, Chapter 13, Learning Objective 7. We will conclude the question, how do you know yourself? By looking at positive sense of self and cultural factors. So you try to create a positive sense of self. And one of the ways people do this is that they show favoritism to anything associated with themselves. So, for example, people rate letters in their own names, especially their initials, as being more beautiful than letters not in their names. You can see this here in this chart. Participants rate the letters in their names, particularly their first and last initials, as especially attractive. So these red bars are the letters that um, are in their initials. Sorry, and then the green bars are letters not in their initials, and the blue letters are letters that are not in their name at all. And they're showing a selection of letters here, but they did this, for all letters, and uh, and you can see that there's quite a significant difference when a letter appears in a person's initials. They tend to find it more attractive, and this is just kind of an example of something not very important, but just to make it's making the point that if something's associated with yourself, you like it more, and you compared to things that are not associated with yourself. Um, okay. Most people experience what's called the better than average effect, which which means that they describe themselves as above average in nearly every way. Um, Statistically, it's impossible for everyone to be above average. So this once again is showing that we create a positive sense of self by thinking more highly of ourselves in different ways. People with high self-esteem are especially likely to exhibit this effect. According to research, most people have positive illusions, that is, overly favorable and unrealistic beliefs in at least three areas. Number one, they continually experience the better than average effect, which we just um, looked at on the last slide. Number two, they have unrealistic beliefs about how much they can control events. For example, believing that wearing a sports jersey helps your team win, which is obviously ridiculous, but there's a lot of people that, you know, believe things like that. And number three, they're unrealistically optimistic about their personal future, and this includes things like belief in that they're going to be successful, or a belief that you're going to have a happy marriage, or a belief that you're going to live a long life. Um, we all want to believe those things, and which is why we probably do believe them, but evidence shows that these beliefs are not realistic in many cases. Social comparison theory says that we seek to evaluate our abilities and our beliefs by comparing them with those of others. We may engage in two types of comparisons. I'm going to begin with the second one here. An upward comparison is comparing oneself with another person who is seen as more competent or in a better situation, which tends to confirm a person's low self-esteem and thus, how makes them feel bad about themselves. But, an upward comparison can also boost your self-concept by inspiring you. This happens as well. You look at somebody that's doing really well in at something, and you might think to yourself, well, if he can achieve that, I bet I can too. And so sometimes an upward comparison is if it inspires you, it can be a good thing. But many times it's like, oh, that person, it can lower your self-esteem because you're thinking, oh, that person's doing so much better than me. Why do they make more money? Or, why do they seem to have a better life or better marriage or something? Um, on the other hand, downward comparisons means that you compare yourself with another person who is seen as less competent or in a worse situation, and that tends to protect a person's high self-esteem and makes a person feel good with increased self-esteem. Um, and that makes sense. If you look at other people that aren't doing as well, you say, well, I'm not as bad off as them, and so the way I'm doing isn't so bad then. A temporal comparison is another form of downward comparison where people view their current selves as better than their former selves. And we can see this result in this study here. College students rated their past selves as having had more negative features than their current selves. So yeah, I used to be worse in these, in various ways, and they view their current selves as having more positive features. So we tend to. It's another form of downward comparison because it's like I'm doing better than we like to think I'm doing better than I used to be in various ways, and that helps to boost your self-esteem and give you a positive sense of self. Um, so this form of downward comparison helps to protect a positive sense of self, as I was just saying. The self-serving bias supports a positive sense of self as well. Um, self-serving bias is the tendency for people to take personal credit for success, but blame failure on external factors. So, for example, let's say you're doing a presentation at school and you do really well on it. Well, you probably think it's because you worked hard on it, and so you deserve that you did well. But if you were to end up doing poorly on the presentation, often people will look for external reasons, like the computer and the projector, they weren't working properly, and that's why the presentation went bad, or some other external reason. And this self-serving bias is very typical especially in more individualistic countries like ours. I'll tell you from my own personal experience, I one place I see the self-serving bias uh, really, really happen is when people play poker or other card games. I mean, it's like when somebody's winning, they're like, I'm on fire. Like I'm just playing so great, you know. And that's why I'm winning. I'm everything, I'm just really on top of my game. And yet, when they're doing poorly, they don't say they're not playing well or they're not, that they're that is anything to do with themselves. Of course, you can probably guess that people will blame the cards whenever people do badly. Oh, I've just been unlucky. I just didn't get the cards. And occasionally that might be true, but a lot of times, the cards are just basically random. So sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. But maybe when you were winning, it was just the cards too. But we don't see it that way. We see bad luck when we lose, and when we're winning, we like to think I'm doing, I'm really playing well. Okay. Um, let's look at some cultural factors that influence sense of self. Collectivist and individualist cultures emphasize different senses of self. Collectivist cultures emphasize connections to family, social groups, and ethnic groups, and conformity to societal norms. So, collectivism is the cultural value that emphasizes obligations to others. within others that are within your own group. So it might be your family group, it might be your work group, it might be your student group, but it's about making sure that you meet your obligations to any groups that you belong to. Collectivist countries include Japan, Greece, Pakistan, China, and some regions of Africa. Individualistic cultures emphasize rights and freedoms, self-expression, and diversity. So individualism is the cultural value that emphasizes the importance of the individual with emphasis on independence and reliance on one's own abilities. Countries that are individualistic include Northern and Western Europe, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States, which many people consider the most individualistic country in the world. People in collectivist cultures tend to value group norms and obedience to authority figures. And you can see, just in this top picture here, everyone dressed the same. People in individualistic cultures tend to emphasize individuality and freedom of expression. So it's like, let your freak flag fly, just be you. So we might get piercings or tattoos or wear, flashy clothing or have a different, color our hair or whatnot. And that's, you see that so much more in an individualistic country, whereas you see a lot of conformity in a collectivist culture. The sense of self differs across cultures, and some aspects are more important to the self, as shown by the larger X's in these diagrams over here. So in collectivist cultures, the most important elements of a person's sense of self tend to reside in areas where the person's sense of self is connected with others. So you can see the most important sense of self is that here, father, sibling, co-worker, friend, mother, it's connections to others. In an individualistic cultures, the most important elements of a person's sense of self tend to reside within the person. They're aspects about you and not necessarily connections to others. Those are not unimportant, but they're not as important as aspects of who you are as an individual. And that will conclude learning objective 7.